2009, I wrote a book called Jump the Curve, and as I was researching it, I came across a wonderful quote from Albert Einstein, and he said to scientists and to technology writers, he said, if you can't explain what you're talking about to an 8-year-old child, you're a fraud. And I thought, that's a wonderful test. And it just so happens I am blessed with an 8-year-old son, and when this picture was taken, he was only 7. And he had not lost any of his teeth yet, but I wanted him to see if he could understand what I meant by jump the curve. So he had not lost any of his teeth, but he finally lost one, and I thought, oh, here's a great opportunity to see if he can grasp what I mean by jump the curve. So I said to him, what would you rather have from the tooth fairy? Would you rather have $5 per tooth, and all babies have 20 teeth, or would you rather have a penny for the first tooth, 2 for the second, 4 for the third? It keeps on doubling. Well, he looks at me like I'm dense. He does the math. He goes, I'm taking the $100, Dad. I go, no, Sean, you have to learn how to jump the curve because your 20th tooth is worth, anyone know? $5,242.88. The reason this is so important is that if you plot out a trend that is growing exponentially, the curve quickly shoots up. The reason this is so important is that there are now 9 trends in society that are doubling. Computer processing power, data storage, bandwidth, the sequencing of the human genome, advances in brain scanning technology, robotics. All of these things aren't just increasing linearly, they're increasing exponentially. So if you want to understand the future, you have to similarly jump the curve. And one of the really interesting things about technology is that if something is growing exponentially, it can also get better, faster, cheaper, and smaller. Many of you can remember some movies from the early 1990s, and they were showing Wall Street executives. And to demonstrate that they were Wall Street tycoons, what device would they show them using back in the early 90s? It was this huge brick-like cell phone. And in the early 1990s, only they could afford it because it cost $5,000. Well, I now want to fast forward to today. This is an unfortunate sign of the times. It's an unemployment line out on Wall Street. But if you look closely, what does every unemployed person have? Well, it's a cell phone, but it's not just a cell phone. You can access the internet, you can social network, you can store every song you've ever purchased on it. If you are so motivated, you can shoot, produce, and edit a movie on it. It is a demonstrably more powerful tool at a fraction of the cost. History reminds us technology has this curious way of getting better, faster, and cheaper, and as it does, it diffuses out. And that leads me to my first trend, which is smart devices. This is a picture of Dr. Daybert Albert, and earlier this year, he developed an electrocardiogram that you can attach to your smartphone for less than $100. Today, ECGs typically cost around $35,000, but this is going to allow individuals to begin sending their heart information directly to their providers. But because I'm a futurist, I want to help people understand the future. And I'm 47 years old, and as a young man, I would go to a lot of concerts. And if you were my age, after the artist was done, what would we do to bring them back out on stage? We would hold up a lighter. Woo, come on back out. Just why we had a lighter, that's none of your business, but we did have it. Well, I got married and had 2 young kids, and for years I didn't go to a concert. I finally went to one a couple of years ago, and what was the big difference? Young people were holding up cell phones. I go, oh, that's a curious difference. And then I went to one just a few months ago, and there was a young kid holding a lighter app on it. And he would hold it up, and it's like, woo! The reason I show you this is because, look, we're still going to do the same things we've always done in the future, but how we do them is going to change ever so slightly. And that leads me to my second trend, and that is the whole field of gaming dynamics or gamification. Look, we are still going to exercise and we are still going to try to eat healthy, but the way we do this is going to change because of this device. If you're in the insurance industry, there is a way to use gaming technology to encourage people to engage in healthier behavior. If you want to eat better, there's a way to use this technology to work with your friends to eat better. Technology is going to allow us to do things in slightly different ways. But here's another curious thing about exponential growth. Anything that just doubles 10 times is 1,000 times bigger. So my son's 10th tooth would have been worth $5.12. His 20th tooth, over 5,000. And a lot of people will say to me, well, Jack, we're not going to see 1,000-fold increase in the future. I go, you know what? Before I even walk you into the future, let's just look back a decade in time. And I did this as I was writing my book. And I put the idea of exponential growth into a search engine, which has grown 1,000-fold in the last decade. The very first entry that pops up is an entry from an online encyclopedia, which didn't even exist 8 years ago, but which has grown 1,000-fold. And there was this bizarre word in there called Zenzizinzik. And I go, what does that mean? Does anyone here know what Zenzizinzik means? I figured not. It means 2 to the 8th power, anything that just doubles 8 times. I'm a fairly conservative guy, so I said, you know what, maybe some of the technologies I'm telling you about aren't going to double 10 times in the next decade, they're just going to double 8. And just last week, a major telecommunication company came out and said, in the next 4 years, by 2015, mobile web video conferencing is going to grow 250-fold in the next 4 years. A Zenzizinzik-like transformation. And that leads us to our third trend, which is, not surprisingly, mobile web video. The way that you communicate with your healthcare providers is going to change radically in the next few years. And you're not going to be doing everything via video, but a lot of your consultations and a lot of your meetings can and will be done this way. So I have another question for you. What is the relationship between all of these numbers? 1,000? Million, billion, trillion, quadrillion. Well, each one is 1,000 times bigger. And this really leads us to our next 4 trends. And I'm going to walk you through why all of these numbers matter. Today, in the healthcare industry, there are thousands of robots, and they are performing prostatectomies and hysterectomies. But the number of robots is doubling every year. So what that means is we're going to see a 1,000-fold increase. We're going to go from thousands of robots to millions of robots, and they're going to start performing knee surgery, heart surgery, potentially even brain surgery. The reason this matters to you is that the incisions are now so precise that you can get in and out of the hospital sometimes up to a week quicker because of this technology. Now, a lot of people will tend to dismiss some of my technologies. And you know what? Some of the technologies I'm telling you about aren't going to be perfect today, but here's an analogy from history. 10 years ago, e-books were big, fat, and clunky and didn't work. 7 years ago, they were slightly less big, but they still didn't work. It was only 3 years ago that a number of providers finally got it right. And today, less than 3 years later, we now sell more books electronically than we do real books. Change happens, and change can happen very fast when a technology is growing exponentially. This leads us to trend number 5, and there's something called radio frequency identification technology or sensor technology. Today, hospitals are employing millions of these sensors, but the number doubling every year, so we're going to go from millions of these sensors to billions of them. And today we're using them in hospitals to track inventory and to track biopsies and other things like that. But the technology is getting better, faster, and cheaper, and they're starting to go on the caps of pill bottles. We know in the healthcare industry that because people don't take their medication properly, that's costing the US healthcare system $290 billion. But as this technology continues to get better, we have an opportunity to significantly address that issue. This trend, number 6, is another 1,000-fold increase, and it's the whole field of genomics. Today, we are sequencing billions of genes in a couple of minutes. Well, this technology is doubling every 4 years, and we're soon going to be sequencing trillions of genes in the blink of an eye. And here's how I want you to think about this. If you wanted to have your genome sequenced just 3 years ago, it would have cost you $70 million. Not very practical. 2009, dropped to $1 million. Still not practical. 2010, 60,000. Today, 10,000. Next year, 1,000, and then below that. What this means is we're going to know so much about your individual genome that it is going to profoundly change healthcare because it's going to allow for personalized medicine. We now know that there are over 1,000 genetic tests that if you have a particular gene, we know a significantly better way to treat you. And this revolution is steamrolling down upon us, and it's incumbent upon all of us to understand its implications. The last trend that's going to undergo a 1,000-fold increase is the whole field of computers. We now have computers that can perform 1 quadrillion calculations per second. This is a mind-boggling number, but here's what you need to know, is that these computers can now access 200 million pages of medical information in 3 seconds. And just a month ago, a health insurer has now hired this computer to do what? To help doctors and insurance companies and hospitals better diagnose disease. Now, I don't want to mislead anyone to say these devices are going to put doctors and nurses out of work. That's not going to happen. But if this equipment can better and more quickly and more accurately diagnose disease, let's allow that, the machine, to do it. That then gives the healthcare provider more time to spend with the patient. The 8th trend is, so we have all of these sensors, and we have all of this genomic information. We have these wickedly powerful computers, and that's going to lead us into the whole field of data mining and business analytics. And here's how I want you to think about this. In World War II, Allied bombers were getting shot down at a staggering rate. And so the military high command said to a group of scientists, they said, figure out how to protect our planes. And so the planes came back, and they were primarily shot up in the wings and the tails. So 18 of the 19 scientists said, well, let's reinforce the wings and the tails. Makes sense, right? Wrong. Here's the lone standout said that's wrong. Here's what we're not seeing. We're not seeing the planes that don't come back, and those are the ones we really want to protect. And counterintuitively, if a plane can land with its wings and its tail shot up, we don't have to address that area, and we do have to protect the area that doesn't have any bullet holes. Once it's explained that way, it makes sense. Well, the analogy to healthcare data mining is, we now have so much data, but often individuals and their healthcare providers are looking at the wrong symptoms. Data mining is going to lead to new insights, and they're going to challenge our intuition. But we have to be open to what the field says because it's going to lead to better healthcare. The 9th trend, it's one that we are already living through, is that as great as this data mining technology is going to be, we're still going to learn more from who? From our friends and our neighbors, and we are now using social networking tools to find out a lot more about our health and how to treat ourselves, and this is a trend that is only going to continue to grow in the future. But now I want to close with one last analogy of exponential growth. And if I had a piece of paper, and if I could fold it 50 times, each time it would get smaller. Remember, things get better, faster, smaller, and cheaper, but it would also get higher and thicker, right? So the question is, after 50 folds, how high do you think that would be? The answer is likely to astound you. The answer is 62 million miles. That is a mathematical fact that if a piece of paper could double, doesn't that sound impossible? To many people it does, but it is a mathematical fact. The reason I tell you this is because, remember, the trends I have been telling you about are in fact doubling. Computer processing technology has already doubled 40 times, and it's going to double 50 times. Gene sequencing technology has already doubled 40 times, and it's going to double another 10, and this is going to take us into a future that to many people sounds absolutely impossible, but it's going to be eminently possible. And the final trend is this, is the whole field of tissue engineering or regenerative medicine. The advances in nanotechnology, biotechnology, stem cell research. We are already growing skin, we are growing kidneys and bladders. just a mile from here, the University of Minnesota has already grown a beating human heart. I am telling you, in the very near future, things that sound impossible today are going to be eminently possible tomorrow. And that's what you have to keep in mind.